Hi, everyone. Welcome to episode 29 of the How to Become a Doctor podcast. We're here at LSU Phase Pre-Health Advising, Support, and Education. My name is Matt Duris. I'm one of the pre-health advisors, and then I'll have you introduce yourself.
Yeah, my name's Robbie Bowen. I'm the director of pre-health programs here in the College of Science.
So this episode was one we came up with just with some of the requests we've been getting during advising about really explaining what it means to be applying to medical or dental school this year. And so the title of this podcast is "So You're Applying to Medical or Dental School This Cycle," because to really understand what that means, we want to get down literally month by month to tell you exactly what's going on. Right now we're recording this in February, so we're really trying to start on a February. We're using this 2025 as a model year to talk about what that's going to look like, and so we'll take them, dental and medical separately, just because they are so different. But here we are, so you're a dental applicant. You are, applying to dental school. It's February. You plan on applying this summer to start the next summer. And we really want to pause and say, okay, what should we be doing? So, Robbie, I want you to start out and talk about letters of rec, first of all, as a February student.
Yeah, so, regardless of the professional school that you're going to be applying to, there are going to be requirements that you have personal letters of reference. It's going to vary depending on the school that you may be applying to or the profession that you're going to be applying to. But in general, you're going to have 2 to 3 typically personal letters of reference. Most of the professions are going to require that they come from faculty members, professors who taught you in the classroom in some sort of didactic classroom setting. There may be some flexibility in terms of, you can get some outside of a classroom from a professional that you know in the field, but there's typically going to be some requirement for educational based reliance on faculty letters, unless you've been out of school for a while and you've been working in the professional workforce. They may substitute that for some people who are familiar with your professional work. But, this you need these determined. You have to have who you're going to get to write the letter for you when you submit your application. So this is February. So this is, sort of the time that you want to be at least in, starting, instigating that to try to talk to faculty members, make some contacts, sort of feel out, who's willing to write the letters for you and sort of get that nailed down, that you have 2 to 3 confirmed letters of evaluation. But again, you want to check the specific schools where you're applying and make sure that you're going to be meeting whatever their individual requirements are.
And so that's obviously, if you're using the review committee, at least this cycle, you have to submit those two faculty names by the end of February. And so really, if you haven't asked yet, definitely need to be asking now. But the idea is, a lot of professors are not going to write the letters in February, but a lot of them are agreeing to write them now. And this is the time to jump on that. So whether you're using the committee or not, you would want to get those secured. They will be writing them a few months after that. But this is really you're wrapping things up, right? So you're trying to finish strong in school in February. You're trying to finish strong with your experiences, getting your shadowing hours, your volunteer hours to get those minimum 100 hours for
Yeah.
both of those. So those
And
kind of things.
keep in mind, like the letter writers may want you to give them, supporting it from documents, a copy of your transcripts. Perhaps they want to see a resume of your experiences that you've done. Some may even ask you for a draft of the personal statement. So, when you make the initial contact to say, will you be willing to write a letter for me? And you get the acknowledgement that they will, then you're going to want to follow up with these supporting documents to make sure that they have information that they can, contribute to a convincing, supportive letter, and not just a form letter, of you took their class. You want them to have additional information about you.
Yeah, so definitely put some pressure, somewhat a little bit on writing your personal statement. We'll get into that, but you might have to write it earlier than planned for those letter writers. But regardless, either way, you have that going on, but you have the DAT as well, dental admissions test. And so, you'll, if you're part of the review committee, you need that taken by April 30th. But regardless, now, you may not have heard, but the DAT, before, the national average, the score was 19, and average at LSU acceptance was 21. And they've moved to a 200 to 16, sorry, a 200 to 600 point scale, where being in the 400s is the key, especially more like 430, 440. So that's starting March 1st, and also they're delaying the release of the score. So it'll take 3 to 4 weeks. So you got to, be in, if by February, be scheduling your DAT by April 30th at latest, to have that 3 to 4 week release in time for that June 1 open of the ADSAS.
Yeah, and the test itself is not changing. The data is not changing in terms of the format, the content of the testing material. It's simply the scoring system. They are transitioning to a new scoring system, and you'll be provided a guide to sort of interpret the what's been the scoring scale and how that would translate into the new scale after March 1st.
Right. So that's just what to keep in mind, it being February. But, as we move into March and April, some of these things will stay constant, right? Classes working on those, experiences working on those. But March and April really is our writing months. And so this is the time to get help with your personal statement. We usually do a workshop on campus. The Career Center does one. Go to the Writing Center at LSU, get your family, friends, high school teacher, professor to help you. But you really be writing your personal statement, but also, the ADSAS is going to have you describe your experiences. A lot of students think that the dental application is just a resume, an 8.5 by 11 page you upload, but it's actually, you having to write individual sentences about each experience. So really thinking about how you're going to market that dental experience, how you're going to market that, tutoring job you have, or the restaurant you work at towards dental school, because you're going to be submitting in June, but you got to be editing before that. So that's a big writing time, March and April. And we have said, of course, the DAT, these kind of things. But, these are all the things you're juggling at once. But, eventually we'll hit May. You take your finals, hopefully you do really well in those, have a strong finish. But then, May will come, and we'll have, the official opening of the ADSAS application for most dental schools, or if you're a Texas resident, the TMD SAS. And so you'll see here, we pulled up the website of the ADSAS for you. You can see they've closed out last cycle, and they've told us that the 26 application cycle will open mid-May. This is a soft opening, so it doesn't mean you can submit mid-May. It just means you can type into it. And usually submission, happens more June 1, around there. And it closes September 1. But Robbie, why don't you talk about just how important it is to submit the ADSAS early?
Yeah, so most dental schools and medical too actually use what are called rolling admissions. They start out with a certain number of seats. As they start interviewing, they start accepting, and so there's less and less seats that are available. And so once the submission dates are there and they start receiving completed verified applications and getting returned secondary applications or supplemental applications for each individual school, they're going to start making contacts in terms of getting interviews scheduled. And so it's important, you want to be early in the cycle. Early is always better in terms of the timing of your submission of your application. It doesn't mean it has to be the very first day that it's open, but just it's just kind of common sense that you're going to look much better when they've only read 10 applications as when they've read 2,000 applications. You're not going to, hopefully you can get that in early. You stand out, you have a good, strong application, you get an early interview, you're sort of ahead of the game when you do that. So it's important, timing is very, very important. Just because they have a designated deadline date, that may be later in the fall, it doesn't mean they're going to still have seats available, when that date comes around. So timing is very important.
Yeah, and we failed to mention here, April 30th is when, as a dental application, all your writing will be due to the review committee. So you take all that writing, save onto it, and then, when this opens up in June, submit. Look, if you're on vacation June 1 with your family, that's okay. You can do it June 7th, but really early June is the key. Definitely, you're not waiting until July or August if possible. But, so you're going to submit this ad sets. This is the general application. If you've done a Common App for undergrad, kind of similar idea, obviously a little more ramped up, but this goes to any schools you select it to go to, and you will get a secondary application from schools, asking for you to fill out additional information. Why are you interested in our dental school specifically? Maybe a couple other essay questions, but the idea is, you are going to be getting that, more July time frame, and you will be sending your transcripts into AdSAS to just make sure that you typed your classes into AdSAS correctly. But once that comes in, your letters of rec, we'll upload those from the review committee, or your professors will. Once you've got those things, your ad SAS, your secondaries, um, you know, all that. There's a few schools that require the Casper test. We have a whole other podcast on that. Um, but the
And
idea is once you have all that, then you're interview ready. So you go ahead,
And
Robbie.
and that's the idea of this soft opening. It's to give you time to sort of get organized, to kind of get all your information, do all your spell checking and all your things like that before the actual submission date. So, the earlier that you can get started, you don't want to be rushed and, submit and have errors or have mistakes on your application that's going to, stand out. So, it's taking your time to be ready to submit early is kind of where what we're saying.
Right. Yeah. We always say a good application a little later is better than a bad application early, but definitely you want to get in early because, we hear of students getting interviews in July, so we want you to be one of those ones getting an interview. Even our school, they will tell you there's not that many interviews they do. So just landing an interview is honestly the tough part. That's what's going on. But, the summer it's going to be, once you get all the writing done, it's going to be hurry up, submit a good application when you're ready, but go ahead and submit it. And there's going to be a little bit of waiting, right? You do the secondary. And at that point, you've gotten in line. You have a great written application. You have your letters uploaded. Take a Casper test if you need to for one of those out-of-state schools like Louisville. And we can flash over to some of those dates that, those are offered. Take it, whenever you can, right? But sometime in the summer. But the idea here is, to get your things in and get in line. And there's gonna be a little bit of waiting. We'll have students that interview in July and others who are waiting, and you do not need to update the schools or check on things. You can look, make sure AdSAS has everything, make sure you have it all, but you don't need to reach out to say, hey, my friend got an interview, I didn't get one yet. Be patient because your interview could last from July to November. And just know that, you might not get an interview, or you just might want to get one after another friend. So that's a quick recap of dental. There's more to say, but we do just want to say that dental is not rolling admissions, right? So they're going to interview you, and then come December 15th, it's the first day they can release, but often they do. They'll release all of the admissions at that point. And then have, a wait list from there. So,
Yeah.
Robbie, I don't know if you
So,
want to
so,
say anything
so
else.
yes, I mean they're making decisions on who they're going to accept, but they can't release it officially until December 15th. That's an agreement between all the AdSAS participating dental schools, is that every dental school will announce their acceptances on the same date. Um, but they are filling their seats as they interview, and so you won't know until December, but you want to have as many opportunities as possible, as early as possible, to be accepted.
Yeah, and so one thing to keep in mind, is that this is new DAT, the 3 to 4 week release. We had students last year say, I'm going to take the DAT June 15th and send them the score the day I get the score. But now this new 3 to 4 week release, just keep that in mind. You might have to bump your test date up a little earlier if you're ready to get that score in time. But definitely just keep those things in mind. I think also I just wanted to mention you might be on a wait list, and so you need to be preparing the whole fall, even while you're waiting, to be still improving yourself if you need to get off a wait list or reapply the next year. Chalk carving is the only thing we didn't mention that is part of the LSU interview only, but just something to be preparing, obviously preparing for your interview all during this in the spring and summer, preparing for that chalk carving as
Yeah,
well.
and
So.
this is the time to be reviewing websites, the schools that you know that you're going to be applying to, going and reading the admissions website at each of those schools. What are the things that they're talking about? Are you picking up on some things that they consider to be important, that they've mentioned in their admissions website? And so, that way when you do get your interview, you're prepared and you have some background information about the school that will make you better prepared to respond to questions that you're likely to get. So, you get your application in and then you start doing, the homework to kind of get prepared for the interviews with the individual schools.
Yeah, so that's our overview of dental. It's obviously a fly through, but if you have confusion, we do have, our pre-dental timeline on our website. We have a whole timeline podcast about the 4 years. This is a zoomed in for applying, but we are going to move on to medical school now. And there's going to be some similar themes here, right? Asking for your letters of rec in February, preparing and scheduling that MCAT date. So some of those things, doing experiences, just that we are going to see some differences, and one big difference is honestly you do want to submit early with medical school, but it is rolling admission and you don't need to maybe rush it, so it's still, we emphasize being early, but we want to focus on some differences. And so same thing for February, getting everything scheduled. But there's two different application types you can have for medical. You can have medical early decision, and we talk about this on other podcasts, but it's choosing, if you choose one school, all eggs in one basket. You do early decision, you have to have everything in August 1st. And for the review committee, you have to have it all in by April 30th. Or if you're applying to more than one school, which is typical since we have two LSU schools even, then you'll be, submitting everything to the review committee by the end of May. But Robbie, why don't you share a little bit about the three different types of general apps for med school, Texas, allopathic, osteopathic.
Yeah, and also, we keep referring to the review committee, and some of you may not be LSU students, so you obviously you want to check if your school that you are attending has a review committee or not. If they do, the medical and dental schools prefer that you go through the process, but you'll need to familiarize yourself with what that process is. For LSU students, we're talking about our, you know, campus committee. So yeah, so as Matt mentioned, there's several different processes depending on where you're applying and what type of professional school you're applying to. So MD, the medical allopathic medicine, is AAMC, and they have a standard application which is called AMCAS. Nationwide application, all medical schools that are allopathic in the U.S. use the standard application, and that Matt has that on the screen right now with sort of their timelines, the deadlines of when they do that. Again, it's a two-step like the dental. You'll do this standard application, then you will submit and you'll begin to get secondary applications. We'll talk a little bit about those timelines. There's also a separate standardized application if you want to do the osteopathic medical schools, the DO programs, which is a growing field, and more students are doing this. Same procedure, but a different application. It's called a COMAS, and that's on the screen right now of some different things there. So if I wanted to apply to an MD program in my state here in Louisiana, if I want to apply to the LSU medical schools, and I want to apply to VCOM, which is an osteopathic school here in our state, I'm filling out two applications. I'm doing the AMCAS application and I'm doing the ACOMAS for the osteopathic school. And then if you're a Texas resident or you're planning to apply to medical school in Texas, Texas has their own medical school application. It's TIMDAS, and that's on the screen right now. And so if I'm from Louisiana, and I want to apply to the Louisiana medical schools, and I want to apply to medical schools in Texas, I'm having to fill out the Texas application as well. Dental applicants, if you're, we didn't mention this, but if you're a dental applicant, from out of from the other 49 states, you can do ADSAS. You don't have to do TMDSS. But if you're a Texas dental applicant, you do have to do the Texas application. So our point is it's not just one size fits all for all the different medical schools in the country. You need to decide, am I going to do MD and DO? Am I going to apply to Texas? And if you are, you're going to have three separate applications. Timeline, they're pretty similar, but it will be three separate applications, application fees, all of that.
Yeah, and I'm glad you brought the fees up, Robert, because the thing is, keep this in mind. There's two different ways. If you're paying for it yourself, it is going to be a separate general application cost for each application, and then a school-specific secondary fee. Now, there is a fee waiver. The AMC one's the biggest package, so you can look at the eligibility, but the AMC Fee Assistance Program, if you qualify for that, you get a discounted MCAT, free MCAT prep materials, a free app to 20 schools when they'll also often the schools will waive the secondary, and then also an assessment if you need that for the MCAT, as well as a free preview exam, which we talk about the preview on another podcast. But it's $100 as well. Now you have to qualify. It's just for lower income, those who qualify. So you can look into it, see if that applies to you. But AMC is the biggest one, but also the other two applications, DO and Texas, also have a program that just involves their application, not the MCAT and
And this
such.
is
But
another example of the importance of early, because you want to apply for this early, much, before you schedule the test, before you start the application, because if you get the fee assistance, then you don't have to pay those fees that you're going to have to come up with. And it's good for 1 year, one cycle. And so there's usually a pool of available money. And once that's gone, then it's gone for that cycle. So it's important to at least start looking into that now if you're going to be applying this cycle.
so yeah, so like we said, similar things, February, March, April, getting letters, getting your test dates ready and all that. And so we just want to mention, what do these cycles look like? We were talking about how they are similar but different. The DO cycle is just going to straight up open like last year. Everything was open May 6th, where the Texas and the AMCAS will have a soft opening where you can type in, and then they don't want people to rush it, so a submission. The idea here, is come May, you're going to need to be, opening and starting these applications. We want you to submit them in May or early June, something like that. But just realize we want you to know kind of what happens, right? Because you do want us to go ahead and submit them. But here's what's going to happen is you come and start your application. Let's say you submit day one on May 27th. No medical school is actually going to receive your application until June 27th. It has to get verified. What this means is you're going to type your grades into your AMCAS and then send them a transcript. They're going to make sure you made no typos. You're going to put that you worked at ABC Clinic here in town. They may look that up on the internet to make sure that's a real clinic in town, that sort of thing. And so this is their first batch sent over. After that, they start rolling them to schools, for a 2 to 8 week delay. But that's why we say submit early, obviously when you're ready, because they get sent over to the med schools eventually, and then the med school has to get it, then send you a secondary app to fill and send back. And then at that point, hopefully your MCAT and letters and other, Casper preview are there to be reviewed. So this is a multi-step process, and it's also exchanged into multiple hands, like, the AMCAS and the schools. So that's just something to keep in mind, is those opening dates, the verification processes, that kind of thing. And so we do have the MCAT, right? A lot of times, we have students asking, when do I take the MCAT? And oftentimes you'll hear from us, by the end of May is a good goal. If you use the LSU review committee, you have to do it once by the end of May. But the reason we say that is you can take technically a test up until the end of, or until September, the end of this cycle, that is eligible. But you realize if you take a test by the end of May, it releases 1 month later, usually by the end of June, and that will be in your account, right when the medical schools start receiving these verified apps. You can see take a test in January, take a test in March, April, May. They'll all be there at the same time, right, there for them to read. Once you start taking the June, July, August dates, there is the risk of the schools waiting for your score to come in. So if you need to wait till then to retest, that's okay. but just know as well, they have that delay on the MCAT, so it's a push and pull on when you take it.
Yeah, and that's why our recommendation is always to try to take the test, sometime in the spring. Because as he mentioned, it's going to take you a month to find out what you made. And then you have to decide, do I need to retest to be competitive? And so taking it in the spring, if you're at LSU and you want to use the review committee, you must take it no later than May to get a letter from us. But it's a safety net for you. Hopefully you get the score that you want and you don't have to worry about it. But if you're waiting and to take it till later in the summer, it's almost like a do or die situation. Like you have to do well enough on that test, or if not, I'm waiting another year to be able to apply to medical school. And so, it's in your best interest to try to take it as in the spring sometime between, the January and May dates. But it's more important to be ready and to be prepared to take that. So hopefully you've already started that process and you've already been in getting ready for that for the last 6 months or so. But the timing of the test, you want to have a safety net. You don't want to go in and it's now or never, which adds more pressure. So hopefully you're ready to take it by the end of May.
So yeah, so as I said, you submit your AMCAS, your Texas app, DO app, whatever, whichever one you're submitting. You're gonna get a secondary from each school, unless a few of them screen and only give it to some students. But you send that back in. You've gotten your your the Texas application will ask you for a transcript later. So you have to wait to hear from that, but you're gonna have the other transcripts sent in. But then, eventually you'll have it all submitted. You'll have your letters, you'll request them to there, have those in, and eventually you'll be waiting, right? So, just for interview. So, if your early decision, you have to have everything by August 1, and you're guaranteed that your interview will be sometime in August or September, and they'll have a decision for you by October 1. Now, it's not necessarily a yes or a no. They can just say that they'll roll you into the regular cycle. And at that point, if you're accepted, great, you're in medical school, you know where you're going. If you're rejected or rolled in the regular cycle, you can apply to other schools. It would be very late, but you can do that. But then the regular interview period is going to start. And so our best students that apply to more than one school, regular decision, are typically some late September, but mostly October is going to be our earliest interview. So if you submit June 1, get everything in, and you're the most amazing student ever, and you apply regular decision, do not be worried if you don't have an interview, come September. It's not going to start till October usually. But just know it goes October to March. So it's a long cycle. Some of you guys that submit in July and August, September, October, you might not be interviewing until January. And you got to be patient because you have to get that interview. And then at that point, that's when they'll let you know if you're on a wait list and no final action, or you're accepted or rejected. So that's kind of one thing we wanted to let you guys know is, like, you really hurry up, don't rush, but hurry up and get your app in, but then know that the interview period is very long. And a lot of you guys may even get an interview and get on no final action in November, and have to wait for everyone else to interview and might not get off of a wait list until April. So I have a lot of students asking me, well, hey, should I send an update to the school? Well, if you haven't heard from them yet, you have an interview, probably not. But if you've interviewed and then some time has passed and it's February, some students do send an update letter, and that's something we could talk through. But the idea is, don't, be patient, but then, look at the numbers, make sure you're around the good numbers. But when it starts coming to March and it's not looking like you're in, you do want to be preparing to start the cycle again, just in case you don't get off a wait list in April or May. So that's kind of like the main thing that we want you guys to see, is just the fact that it's a hurry up and wait cycle. You definitely want to get things in. We briefly mentioned the preview in Casper. Definitely check out our podcast on that. But you need to take those tests at some point at one of these dates they have here, which can be school specific. But you want to make sure you're verifying everything. We can help you in the pre-health office. But the idea is, get everything in, be patient, interview. You may have multiple acceptances, and then come the spring, you will have the time where if you have multiple acceptances, you'll need to accept your only acceptance, and then let the other schools know that you're not going to be attending there to have some movement, on the school list. So that's our quick overview we have here of if you're applying to medical school. We did want to mention we didn't cover everything, right? So there are some other programs out there. We've got the Caribbean schools, podiatry, optometry, naturopathy, UQ auctioneer. So these are just a few of the timelines. But if you need help with these kind of things, definitely come in and talk to us. Robbie, did you want to mention anything just about?
Yeah, I think, the importance is this is the time to be exploring, looking at those particular schools that you're targeting. What are their timelines? What are their deadlines? When do they, um, you know, expect applications to be in? Do they have information about when they start interviewing? What is their secondary process? Do they send secondaries to everybody? Is it selective? So this is the time now to be doing research on those particular schools so that you kind of know what they expect, and you can get yourself ready to make sure that you're meeting all those deadlines. And that's the thing about the timing of the application. They want students who are ready to go from day one. And so if you're waiting to submit your application until the end of the summer, the perception there may be like, is this person really, ready for this? Are they really serious about this? Because my applications have been open for 2 months and you're just now starting to fill that out. So, um, you know, perception and things like that, or we want people that are gung-ho and ready to accept this challenge and move on. So you demonstrate that by being organized, having everything ready, and submitting early in the cycle.
Yeah, so definitely case by case situation. I do have some students they take the MCAT in January, they don't like their score, they're rushing and taking it in April and May. And there could be an advantage to have some study time, take it in June, let that MCAT release in July, when the secondaries are going out. So don't rush it, but if you need help, come in for advising. But that's what we got for today. Check out our other episodes and reach out to us if you have any more questions. Thanks.